So, today we're going to unlock the secrets hidden inside a nation's blueprint, its own people. We're going to see how just counting heads, in a way, can tell us so much about a country's past and give us a surprisingly clear look into its future. I know, it sounds a little crazy, right? Can one simple chart really predict the huge challenges and opportunities a country is going to face for, generations to come? Well, that's the big question we're digging into. And believe me, the answer is pretty mind-blowing. So, how do we do all this? Well, it all comes down to something called population composition. You can think of it like a recipe for an entire society. It's a detailed look at who makes up a nation, and it really boils down to just two super simple but incredibly powerful ingredients: age and sex. All right, let's dig into these two core ingredients. I mean, they seem almost too basic, don't they? But you'll see that when you put them together, they unlock this massive treasure trove of information about a country. First up, you've got age structure. That's just a fancy way of saying we group people by how old they are. And just that one detail can tell us if a country is young and booming, or if it's getting older and maybe even shrinking. And then there's the sex ratio. It's simply the number of males for every 100 females. And this one little number can reveal these deep, fascinating stories about a country's culture, its history, and even its most controversial policies. Let's take China as a quick example. For every 100 women, there are about 105 men. Now, you might be thinking, what's 5 extra guys? But that little 5-point gap represents millions and millions of people. It's an imbalance that is the direct result of decades of government policy and some really powerful cultural preferences. We're going to circle back to that story in a bit. Okay, so how do we actually see all of this information in one spot? Geographers have this incredibly powerful tool called a population pyramid. The best way to think of it is like a demographic X-ray of an entire nation. And look, don't let the name intimidate you. They look a little complex, but I promise, they're super easy to read. Okay, so the vertical line, the y-axis, that's just age, with the youngest kids at the bottom and the oldest folks at the top. The horizontal line, the x-axis, shows you how many people are in each of those age groups, and the whole thing is just split right down the middle. Males on the left, females on the right. That's it. Seriously, that's the whole thing. Okay, so once you know the basic layout, this is where the magic happens. The actual shape of the pyramid starts telling you a story. It gives you this amazing snapshot of a country's journey, where it's been, what's happening right now, and where it's probably headed. And there are really 4 basic shapes you're going to see. First, you've got that classic wide base, like the Democratic Republic of Congo. That's a sign of rapid growth, a massive youth bulge that creates this huge demand for schools, food, and eventually jobs. Then you see a slightly wider base, kind of like China's. That shows slow growth and points to the huge challenge of supporting a quickly aging population. A more rectangular or column-like shape, like you see in the US, means things are stable, basically at zero growth. The main challenge there is just balancing resources fairly across all the different age groups. And finally, if the base is narrower than the top, like in Germany, that means the population is actually declining. And that can lead to some really serious problems, like labor shortages and a huge strain on pensions. And all of this leads us straight into the economic side of things. See, a country's age structure isn't just some abstract idea on a chart. It creates a very real economic balancing act between the people who work and the people who depend on them. To get a handle on this, economists use this really clever metric called the dependency ratio. It's designed to measure exactly how much economic pressure the working age population is under to support the youngest and the oldest members of society, the people we call dependents. The math is actually pretty easy. You just take the number of dependents, so that's everyone under 15 and over 65. You divide that by the number of people of working age and multiply by 100. The bottom line is, the bigger that final number, the heavier the burden is on the workforce. This chart makes it super clear. So here we see 40% of the population is dependent on the other 60%. So you can imagine, right? A country with that wide base pyramid with tons and tons of kids, or a top-heavy one with lots of retirees, well, its dependency ratio is going to be much higher, and that means it has a much bigger economic problem to solve. But here's the thing you have to remember. These shapes aren't just accidents of nature. As this quote says, they can be totally, radically, and permanently changed by what a government decides to do. And there is no bigger or better example of this than China's one-child policy. So back in 1979, China was worried its population growth was just unsustainable. So it launched one of the most massive social experiments in human history, the one-child policy. And this single policy completely reshaped Chinese society for more than 30 years before they finally lifted it in 2015. And the impacts were profound and in some ways devastating. It dramatically shrank the base of China's population pyramid, basically fast forwarding the country into the aging crisis it's dealing with right now. And remember that skewed sex ratio we talked about? The cultural preference for sons, combined with this strict policy, led to millions of missing women, creating a huge surplus of men. The social fallout from that is immense. An entire generation of men facing incredible pressure to find a wife in a society where there just literally aren't enough women. It's a huge demographic challenge that China is still wrestling with today. So that brings it all back home. We've seen how these simple shapes and numbers can tell these epic stories about a nation's past, its present, and its future. So I'll leave you with this question. What does your country's pyramid look like? And what story is it telling about the world you're going to be living in?